Imagine being able to transform the way your partner responds to you in just a few minutes, not through tricks or pressure, but by understanding a deeper rhythm of connection that most people completely overlook, a rhythm that specialists quietly acknowledge yet rarely explain in simple human terms. And once you see it, you can never unsee it, because it changes not just performance, the entire emotional experience between two people who want to feel closer, safer, and more alive together. What many people misunderstand about intimacy is that it does not begin in the moment of physical closeness. It begins long before that, in the subtle cues of attention, tone, patience, and emotional presence that signal safety to the nervous system. Because real responsiveness in a partner is not forced, it is invited, and the body follows the mind far more than people realize. When experts talk about REP, what they are often referring to is not a mechanical outcome, but a shift in comfort, trust, and anticipation, a state where the body is no longer guarded and instead becomes receptive, and this shift can happen surprisingly quickly when the right emotional and sensory conditions are created. The idea that there is a fixed timeline for connection is misleading, because what truly matters is how effectively someone can move their partner from a state of distraction or tension into a state of presence, and that transition is where everything begins to change. It is in the way you look at someone without rushing, the way your voice softens instead of demanding, the way your attention becomes undivided rather than scattered, and these small details accumulate into a powerful signal that says you are here, fully, without pressure, without expectation, and that signal alone can dissolve resistance faster than any technique people try to memorize. There is also a physiological layer to this that often goes ignored, because when someone feels emotionally safe and mentally engaged, their body naturally begins to respond through increased circulation, heightened sensitivity, and a deeper awareness of touch. And none of this requires force. It requires alignment between emotional intent and physical expression. Many men unknowingly rush this process, thinking that speed or intensity will create a stronger reaction, but in reality, it often does the opposite by triggering subtle tension, and tension is the enemy of responsiveness because it keeps the body in a guarded state rather than an open one. When you slow down just enough to allow anticipation to build, when you let moments breathe instead of filling them with urgency, you create a contrast that the mind finds incredibly engaging, and that engagement translates into physical response more quickly than people expect. There is also something deeply important about consistency in your energy, because unpredictability in attention can create confusion rather than excitement, whereas a steady, calm, and confident presence builds trust, and trust accelerates. The truth is that responsiveness is not about convincing someone to react. It is about removing the barriers that prevent natural reaction, and those barriers are almost always emotional before they are physical. Think about how different it feels when you are truly relaxed compared to when you are stressed, how your body behaves differently, how your awareness shifts. And now imagine guiding someone into that relaxed state through your presence alone, without saying a word about it, just by the way you carry yourself and interact. A real shift happens, and that is why some people seem to create strong reactions effortlessly while others struggle, despite trying harder, because effort without understanding often leads to resistance rather than connection. Another overlooked element is timing, not in the sense of rushing, but in the sense of knowing when to pause, when to continue, and when to simply stay present without escalating anything, because those pauses are not empty, they are charged with anticipation, And anticipation is one of the most powerful drivers of responsiveness. When someone feels that something meaningful is unfolding, rather than being rushed, their mind leans into the experience instead of pulling away from it, and that leaning in is what accelerates everything naturally. There is also a layer of communication that happens beyond words, in subtle shifts of breathing, posture, and eye contact, and learning to notice these signals allows you to respond in a way that feels intuitive rather than mechanical, which again reinforces comfort. When people feel understood without having to explain themselves, their guard drops faster, and that is when responsiveness becomes almost immediate, because nothing is holding it back. This is why the idea of a fixed method can be misleading, because what works consistently is not a rigid set of actions, but a flexible awareness of the other person's state, combined with a calm and confident presence that guides rather than pushes. The more you focus on creating the right environment, internally and externally, the less you need to rely on techniques, because the response you are looking for becomes a natural outcome rather than something you have to chase. And perhaps the most important realization is that intimacy is not about performance at all. It is about connection. And when connection is strong, performance takes care of itself in ways that feel effortless and genuine, rather than forced or artificial. And that is what creates experiences that people remember, not because of intensity alone, but because of how deeply they felt seen, understood, and safe in that moment. As that awareness deepens, something subtle yet powerful begins to shift in the dynamic between two people, because once a person feels that they are not being rushed or evaluated, their natural rhythm starts to emerge, and this rhythm is where genuine responsiveness lives, not in forced excitement, but in a gradual unfolding of comfort and curiosity that builds from within. What they often mean is that the body does not need long to respond when the mind has already been put at ease. And this is why emotional pacing becomes far more important than physical pacing, because if the emotional state is aligned, the physical response tends to follow almost immediately. Many men overlook this and focus entirely on external actions, yet the internal experience of their partner is what determines everything, and that internal experience is shaped by how safe, valued, and understood they feel in that moment. When you begin to pay attention to these invisible layers, you start to notice that even small adjustments in your tone or timing can create a noticeable difference in how your partner responds, because these signals are interpreted subconsciously long before any conscious reaction takes place. There is also a profound connection between relaxation and sensitivity, because the more relaxed someone becomes, the more aware they are of subtle sensations, and that awareness amplifies every interaction, making even gentle moments feel significant and engaging. This is why slowing down does not reduce intensity, it actually enhances it by giving the mind time to process and anticipate what comes next, and anticipation itself can create a powerful sense of excitement that builds naturally without pressure. Another key factor that experts often emphasize is the importance of consistency in attention, because when your focus is steady and undivided, it communicates sincerity, and sincerity builds trust faster than anything else. When trust is present, hesitation fades, and when hesitation fades, responsiveness increases almost automatically because there is nothing left to hold it back. It is also important to understand that responsiveness is not a one-time event. It is a continuous exchange, a feedback loop where each reaction influences the next. And when you become attuned to this loop, you can adjust in real time in a way that feels natural rather than calculated. This creates a sense of flow. And flow is where the most meaningful experiences happen because both people are engaged without overthinking, simply responding to each other in a way that feels intuitive and genuine. There is also an emotional depth that comes into play here, because when someone feels truly connected, their response is not just physical, it becomes emotional as well. And this emotional engagement intensifies everything, making the experience feel more complete and satisfying. Many people underestimate the power of emotional presence, yet it is often the missing piece that transforms an ordinary interaction into something memorable and deeply fulfilling. When you combine emotional presence with patience and awareness, you create an environment where your partner can fully relax into the experience. And in that state, responsiveness becomes almost effortless because the body is no longer holding back. It is also worth noting that confidence plays a subtle but important role, not in the sense of dominance or control, but in the sense of being comfortable and grounded in yourself, because that kind of confidence is reassuring and allows your partner to relax more easily. And when someone feels that you are calm and present, they are more likely to mirror that state, and this mutual calmness creates a foundation where everything can build naturally. There is a tendency for people to think that intensity must come from speed or force, but true intensity often comes from depth of connection, from the feeling that each moment matters and is being experienced fully rather than rushed through. What creates lasting impression, because it engages not just the body, but the mind and emotions as well. And when all three are aligned, the response is not only quicker, but also more meaningful. Another aspect that deserves attention is the role of curiosity, because when you approach intimacy with genuine curiosity about your partner's experience, rather than focusing solely on your own performance, you naturally become more attentive and responsive to their needs, and this attentiveness often leading to a stronger and quicker reaction, because your partner senses that their experience truly matters. This shift from performance to connection is what many experts quietly emphasize, because it changes the entire dynamic from one of pressure to one of exploration, and exploration is inherently more engaging and less stressful. As you continue to develop this awareness, you may notice that the need for effort begins to decrease because you are no longer trying to create a response, you are allowing it to happen by removing the obstacles that prevent it, and this is a much more sustainable and effective approach in the long run. It also creates a sense of mutual enjoyment, because both people feel involved rather than one person trying to impress the other, and this shared experience is what strengthens connection over time. Ultimately, the idea of a quick response is not about rushing the process, it is about understanding how to create the conditions where the process can unfold naturally and efficiently, and when those conditions are present, the timeline becomes almost irrelevant because everything flows smoothly without resistance. And as this deeper understanding settles in, something even more meaningful begins to take shape, because what started as a focus on quicker responsiveness evolves into a completely different perspective on intimacy itself, one that is no longer driven by outcomes, but by the quality of the shared experience. And this shift is where lasting transformation happens. When both people feel emotionally aligned, physically at ease, and mentally present, the connection stops feeling like something that needs to be managed, and instead becomes something that naturally unfolds, moment by moment, without pressure or expectation. This is where the idea of time fades into the background, because when someone feels safe, engaged, and genuinely desired, their responsiveness is no longer something that needs to be triggered. It becomes an organic reaction that flows effortlessly from the state they are in. What many people initially seek as a technique reveals itself to be something much deeper, a combination of awareness, patience, emotional intelligence, and presence that cannot be faked but can absolutely be developed with intention. The truth is that the body responds quickly when the mind is not resisting, and the mind stops resisting when it feels understood, respected, and free. And this is why the most powerful approach is not about doing more, but about removing what does not belong, the tension, the urgency, the need to prove something, all of which create subtle barriers that slow everything down. When those barriers are gone, responsiveness does not need to be forced. It simply appears, often faster than expected, because nothing is holding it back anymore. There is also a profound emotional layer that continues to deepen over time, because when someone consistently feels safe and valued in your presence, their trust grows, and with that trust comes a willingness to be more open, more expressive, and more connected. And this ongoing expansion is what turns short moments of connection into long-term intimacy that feels fulfilling rather than routine. Many people never reach this level because they remain focused on surface-level actions, constantly searching for new techniques, without realizing that the real shift comes from within, from how they show up, how they listen, and how they respond to their partner's emotional state. When you begin to prioritize these internal qualities, everything external starts to align more naturally, and what once felt complicated becomes simple, not because it lacks depth, but because it is no longer clouded by unnecessary effort. It is also important to recognize that every person is different, and while the principles of emotional safety, presence, and attentiveness apply universally, the way they are expressed can vary, which is why flexibility and awareness are so important. When you remain open and observant, you can adapt in real time, creating a personalized experience that feels genuine rather than rehearsed. And this authenticity is what people respond to most strongly, even often. There is a quiet confidence in this approach, a sense that you are not trying to control the outcome, but are instead guiding the experience in a way that feels natural and respectful. And that confidence itself becomes attractive because it communicates stability and understanding. Over time, this creates a feedback loop where positive experiences reinforce trust, and increased trust leads to even deeper and quicker responsiveness, not just in the moment, but across the entire relationship. What once seemed like a specific result tied to a short time frame becomes part of a much larger pattern of connection, one where both people feel seen, appreciated, and emotionally fulfilled. And this is ultimately the point that often goes unspoken, that true intimacy is not about achieving a certain reaction within a certain number of minutes. It is about creating an environment where meaningful connection can happen easily and consistently, where both people feel comfortable enough to be fully present, and where responsiveness is simply a reflection of that comfort and connection. When you understand this, the focus shifts away from trying to get something and toward creating something that is shared, mutual, and deeply satisfying on multiple levels. In the end, what experts hint at but rarely say outright is that the most powerful approach is not a secret technique, but a way of being, a combination of patience, attentiveness, emotional awareness, and genuine presence that invites rather than demands, that connects rather than pressures, and that ultimately leads to experiences that are not only more responsive, but also more meaningful and memorable. When you embrace this fully, you realize that the real transformation is not just in how quickly someone responds, but in how deeply they connect with you. And that is what turns fleeting moments into lasting intimacy that continues to grow stronger over time.